On October 25, 2012, a police officer named Mike Avila fired 18 shots from a helicopter at a speeding truck on the Texas-Mexico border. Using his LaRue rifle, which in the words of its marketer is, quote, optimized for battle, unquote, Avila shredded the tires of the truck. He suspected it might be smuggling drugs. In fact, the truck was driven by a 14-year-old. It was carrying no drugs or weapons. Its cargo consisted of 6 undocumented Guatemalan immigrants hidden under a black sheet on a truck bed. They wanted to do construction work. As the shooting unfolded, one immigrant named Jose Isabel heard a scream. It was from his brother, Jose Leonardo. The scream was so terrible that Jose Isabel later would recall feeling chilled in the sweltering heat. Within an hour, it was all over. Jose Leonardo and another man were dead. A third man was critically injured and later would die too. The Texas Department of Public Safety was allowing its officers to shoot at moving vehicles from helicopters. As you might expect, officials did their utmost to bury the story. The survivors of the shooting were held in a detention facility and later deported. In September 2013, a jury declined to indict police officer Avila. As the headlines faded, Melissa Del Bosque got going. What gives this piece particular resonance is that the militarization of the border has shaped up to be one of the most contentious and actually consequential stories of this political season. Today, the Texas Department of Public Safety, which hired police officer Avila, is still expanding its military arsenal. The U.S. Border Patrol is doubling down on what it calls a virtual wall of drones, blimps, and tower-mounted cameras. That wall conceals heartbreak and shattered dreams rarely chronicled. 2 years after the shootout, Melissa revisited 7-Mile Road. There, hidden in a tangle of brush, a wooden cross states simply, "A faithful father died here. He was looking for work." On behalf of the Sidney Hillman Foundation, I want to thank Melissa and the Texas Observer and the Investigative Fund for having the courage and the humanity to expose the factual and emotional truths of one especially dark afternoon on the Texas-Mexico border. And now over to Melissa. Thank you.
I've covered the U.S.-Mexico border for nearly 2 decades, and since 9/11, the militarization, the war rhetoric around our southern border has drummed up a lot of fear and xenophobia. But when the local news reported that our state police had shot 3 men from a helicopter, I couldn't believe it. Shooting out the tires of cars during high-speed pursuits from a helicopter wasn't only completely reckless. This had happened in a metroplex of nearly 1 million people, but it was also completely crazy. How had we come to this? I wasn't aware of this latest border security tactic. It would turn out that local communities and border legislators weren't aware that this was going on either. I believe the way we treat people at our borders says a lot about who we are as a nation, and it sends a message to our neighbors and to the rest of the world. Aren't we the land of opportunity, a nation of immigrants? We're not a country that deploys helicopter snipers in peacetime over American cities. At least that's not the country that I want to live in. So I set out to get the police video of the shooting, and I kept digging for the next 2 years. I went to Guatemala to find the survivors of the shooting and the families of the victims. We knew so little about what had brought these men to our border, and it would turn out that they had jobs waiting for them in New Jersey. Some of their family members lived not far from here, actually, working in chicken processing plants and on construction sites. I also filed numerous FOIA requests. DPS charged me several $100s, but then would not make the documents available, even after I asked the Attorney General to intervene. But one day, I finally got lucky. A grand jury had been convened in the border county where the shooting occurred, but the jury had decided not to indict. Still, the district attorney would not make any of the files available. But then he lost his election. So I filed another information request. And in the shuffle, as he moved out and the new DA moved in, they missed the deadline to once again reject my request. Yeah, all you journalists know how rare this is, that you get this lucky. So when I got the letter saying that they had to turn over the helicopter video and other evidence, I had to read the letter 3 times. I couldn't believe it. We never got to see any of that when it happened. We just heard that there was a shooting, and we didn't see the aftermath, and we never knew the details until we were able to get hold of this footage. The police officers and game wardens at the scene appeared more concerned with catching the men who had bailed out of the truck. After the story came out, some TV stations ran the video, and I was happy that people for the first time could hear the whole story. The families of the 2 men who died have now filed a civil lawsuit against the state police. The first hearing will be in August. Also, some Democratic legislators called for an investigation into the state's no-bid contracts with border security consulting groups led by former military generals. There's a big industrial border security complex growing right now, and a lot of this negative political rhetoric we hear from Trump and other candidates really fosters a lot of this militarization along the border. But little has changed really in Texas. The legislature doubled down in the last legislative session on more militarization and gave $800 million to DPS. Our southern border is rapidly becoming one of the most militarized regions in the world, nowhere more so than in Texas, where we have not only helicopter SWAT teams, but armored gunboats patrolling the Rio Grande with 30 cal machine guns, drones, and spy surveillance planes. All of this with little input from the communities, which are largely of color and low income, where they patrol. With dwindling resources, climate change, and growing insecurity in Latin America and elsewhere, I believe we're going to see more immigrants, more refugees arrive at our southern border. How we receive them will be one of our most pressing challenges, as it was in the last century. Once again, we need to decide what defines us, justice and freedom or fear. Thank you again to the Hillman Foundation for shining the spotlight.